All right, well, it's top of the hour, so let's get started. And as we do, just a couple of things for you to be aware of. Your audio connections have been muted throughout the Zoom. This is by no means in an effort to dissuade you from participating in our conversation today. If you have questions or comments or want to be part of the conversation, please use our Q&A feature in Zoom. A recording of this session can be made available upon the end of our meeting and our time together. And with that, let's get started. Thank you for joining us for Medisafe's First Take, where we discuss the lasting impact of COVID-19 and on digital health. I'm Shannon O'Toole, the Senior Marketing Manager for Product Marketing. Today, I am joined by Dr. Danny Sands. Dr. Danny is our Chief Medical Officer here at Medisafe. In addition to that, he is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School and an attending at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center here in Boston. Danny, you're a pretty busy guy there. In addition to Danny, we also have Matt Longman. Matt is the Marketing Communications Manager at Medisafe. He comes to us with a lot of experience from both Merck and Humana around communicating patient engagement and patient management strategies. So together as a panel, we're going to dive into a discussion about the impact on digital health. We know we're living that digital solutions are now a larger part of our life than ever before. The demand for digital technology is more prominent in healthcare than it has ever been before. And today we're going to discuss both those expectations and the application of digital health solutions in healthcare. This is a conversation that's important to us at Medisafe, because at Medisafe, it is our mission to empower people to improve their health using technology. This has been at the core of our company since its founding in 2012. We use this mission to create digital drug companions that provide holistic support for patients and caregivers alike. We're the leading digital therapeutics company when it comes to specializing in digital companion platforms. As we get started in our discussion and our time together today, I want to take a few minutes to introduce you to Medisafe, and then we're going to take on a discussion where we hear about what patients' expectations are and providers, and talk about where we go from here. As we get started, let me introduce you to Medisafe. As I mentioned, Medisafe is the leading digital drug companion. We're the leading platform for medication management. Currently, we are just shy of 7 million registered users worldwide. This represents the users who found us on their own by downloading Medisafe from one of the app stores. Medisafe is always free to users to download and use to manage their medications. We have a great credentials of providing the best support for our users, as is evidenced by our reviews and satisfaction ratings. Our approach to medication management is holistic. This means that we're not just focusing or targeting on one specific medication. We're making medication management a part of everyday life. In addition to that, we partner with leading pharma companies or entities within the industry to create branded digital drug companions. What this means is we take what our partners need to support their patients and infuse it in our digital platform. The result: comprehensive and proactive support, guidance, and resources available for patients at every step of their journey. As we move forward in the presentation, I now want to take just a few minutes to introduce you to the digital drug companion through a demonstration. So as we start the demonstration, what you're looking at here is actually the Medisafe digital drug companion as designed for, make sure I'm sharing the right thing here, as designed for patients to use to manage their medications. Matt, can I just check in with you? Are you seeing my phone there? I want to make sure I'm showing the right screen.
I am seeing, it looks like I'm seeing it now, yes.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Real-time check-in, it's the way of Zoom, I guess. All right, so let me take you forward in a demonstration now. So what you're looking at here is my instance or my platform of Medisafe. Here you can see all of those medications that I as a patient am using Medisafe to manage. On the bottom of the screen in that footer, that's going to guide me as a patient to resources that can help me further support my medications. Things like additional information about the medications that I'm taking, or more comprehensive support around managing measurements, or even documenting in a diary everything that I'm feeling or experiencing as a patient. You can see my patient profile in the header above the app. Now, this is an example of the native experience of Medisafe. What I want to take you through now is that branded experience that we just spoke about. We accomplish this by adding a medication name. In this case, I'm going to use Nordicet as my medication. I note the details about the medication I'm taking, and then I can start to add a little bit of information about what stage of the journey am I in as a patient. Asking questions in the process of adding medications is one way that Medisafe creates a dynamic persona for patients to provide the proper support based off of where the patient is in their journey. I'll review the schedule of how I'm going to take my Nordicet medication. And now you can see that I've successfully added Nordicet to my digital companion. I should pause to mention that Nordicet is a simulated drug that we use for marketing purposes for Medisafe, but it's meant to represent the experience of a biologic injectable medication. So now as I move forward in the demonstration, you're going to see how I'm going to leave that native Medisafe experience and go into a Nordicet experience. Here you're going to start to get a sense of the themes, the colors, the language that represents this brand. I can review any important safety information, review those terms and conditions. And as I accept this information, I'm going to be brought into this Nordicet experience. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about this branded digital drug companion. It consists of a personalized feed, which is going to have resources, content, questions, interventions that are specific to my needs as a patient, and an activity panel that's going to provide buttons and more real estate to provide different types of support available at the touch of a button. We have the ability to integrate into existing patient support programs or vendors based off of how we calibrate this experience. So you get a sense of how Medisafe is going to infuse a brand experience into the general experience of Medisafe. The reason that we bring this up at the start of this conversation is this is the type of digital health solution that is necessary now in healthcare. We know that digital drug companions put patient support in the palm of patients' hands, and that is what patients need right now. So we've had this conversation a lot throughout our industry, and no one has been a bigger part of that conversation than Matt. So Matt, I want to kind of turn it over to you for a little bit to hear what you're hearing in regards to those expectations and what you're seeing in the industry in general around digital solutions.
Sure, thanks. That was a great demonstration. And I know that kind of the larger thing that everyone is focused on right now is COVID, and so that certainly is taking place throughout the industry. It's really affecting the industry, and we saw just at HLTH just a couple weeks ago that there were a number of changes from among organizations that were responding to COVID and really shifting to digital tools in order to maintain patient connections. As a result, companies like Amazon Health and Google are now looking to use digital connections and AI to help patients stay connected in the home. And it's a new enhancement that's been brought about by COVID. So certainly COVID is, on top of everyone's mind. IBM Watson, they also announced a digital health pass that will allow patients to keep a digital health record of their most recent COVID results on their smartphone. And Pharma is also helping to lead this effort too. Sanofi is creating new digital models to help bring guidance direct to patients for medication brands and therapeutic areas. I think, Shannon, we're still seeing your phone, so I want to switch back to the slides if we can.
Thanks, Matt. How are you seeing my screen now?
Yes, we're seeing the web with digital health putting support in patients' hands.
Okay, next slide.
There we go. Yes. And so, as as you'll see on this slide, it's not just tech companies and pharma getting into the act. We've also seen many healthcare systems that have implemented digital health tools to stay connected to patients during COVID. We did a survey back in May and found that 44% of patients are now using a new device or digital health app to manage their health during COVID-19. And with fewer in-person visits taking place, the use of digital health has ushered in a new way for patients and providers to stay connected. Patients have adopted this technology really quickly, liking the ease of use and finding that they're able to quickly monitor their health and take greater action over their health. Patients also like the more personalized care, the quick response nature of digital tools, and the convenience that comes with digital connection. We saw that 60% of patients say they'll continue to use digital health tools even after COVID is over. These are all encouraging statistics, but as you'll see in the next slide, there's still a great amount of uncertainty surrounding COVID-19. It's still that big question that hangs in the air. So just a few weeks ago, we did an additional survey to our users about the COVID-19 vaccine. It showed a great amount of hesitancy actually in receiving the vaccine. 65% of patients said they would wait on receiving a vaccine, deferring ultimately to their healthcare provider on whether it was right for them. 11% even said they would never take a COVID vaccine. Too uncertain about it. They're skeptical about the process, it being rushed to market. Many participants said that they were concerned about the overall effectiveness, its side effects, and the complications from the vaccine. It definitely seems like a lot of this doubt stems from a lack of communication from experts on timing, on testing, on the effectiveness. So there's a lot of still uncertainty, a lot of question in the market around, will this help end the pandemic? But we also saw a very different picture when we asked participants about the seasonal flu vaccine. 73% of patients said they are or have already received their seasonal flu vaccine, something that has a tremendous amount of information, education, and support to educate the public on its effectiveness. So, as we look to the future, the COVID-19 vaccine definitely seems like an area where a digital health tool might be an easy way to help educate users and support greater adherence. So, as we move further into kind of how this operates, its impact to patients, I'm definitely interested to hear how healthcare providers view this greater push into digital health. So let's take a look at, the healthcare provider perspective. I know there was a survey back in June kind of showed how healthcare providers and how provider operations changed as a result of COVID-19, especially how providers began to interact with their patients and pharma companies. It looks like about 65% of providers shifted to digital health tools as a result of COVID-19, and nearly 20% look to maintain those connections going forward. The survey also revealed a positive shift in how pharma companies engage with healthcare providers, with increased digital connection between pharma and patients to support a more engaged and active patient experience. So all of that good news, but let's hear from a physician directly. Dr. Sands, what are you seeing from a provider perspective on the increased use of digital health tools?
There is no question that we have, the COVID pandemic has accelerated our adoption of digital health tools. It has been a huge boon for both patients and for clinicians. We have many patients who are uncomfortable coming into the office. We're trying to now get them back into the office. Now things are a little bit safer. We have even doctors who are uncomfortable going into the office. So yes, this has been huge, as is supported by that data from Accenture.
I think we're all feeling that way to some degree. So it's important to hear from the provider perspective on that as well. Let me ask you another question, Dr. Sands, about how do you see the human interaction combining with digital health tools to form a greater connectivity in this time of COVID and beyond?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question, Shannon, because if you think about digital tools, okay, they are really just tools. And I think it's important for us to understand that. And I think that I have problems when people talk about digital health, because being a doctor, and I still take care of patients, frequently. I just did yesterday, in fact. To me, digital health is an oxymoron. Health is actually an analog process. There are some aspects of health that are digital, but we won't talk about those. But I will say that digital health tools can really help to augment a relationship over time. So the relationship, for example, that I as a doctor have with my patients, they don't always need to be seen in the office. Tools that patients use on their own, first of all, can help them because they can get questions answered. They can use devices like Medisafe, tools like Medisafe that help them take their medications in between visits. And then when they're going to connect to the healthcare system, digital tools can be helpful there. So in other words, digital tools can only go so far with a patient just talking to digital tools, as much artificial intelligence as we might have. But because healthcare is really an analog system, we really need the human touch in there somewhere. And whether that's coaching, counseling, the examination, the kind of relationships that are important in healthcare, all those things become very important. So these are digital health tools. They are very helpful. They can help a lot when patients take care of themselves. But at some point, these are tools that are helping to augment and allow us to scale the human resources that we have.
So then in considering that and some of the challenges and limitations with digital health, what are some other challenges you see in successfully engaging patients?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Matt. I have a very diverse patient population, and certainly I've been working in digital health my whole career, really, even before we called it digital health. And yet we have challenges, and we have challenges that existed when I started and exist today. And some of those challenges have to do with socioeconomic factors. So whether someone is uncomfortable using technology, cannot use technology, doesn't understand the language, doesn't have access to technology, all of these things are very, very important. And just to give you a concrete example, in our practice where we have patients who, may be very well off and well educated, and we have patients who are, almost homeless, wide diversity. And we have immigrants and so on who don't speak English. In March, our practice at Beth Israel Deaconess, we transitioned over a weekend from seeing patients entirely face-to-face to entirely virtual. And that was a challenge, obviously, for us because change is difficult. It's hard for our patients too. And some of our patients, though, couldn't really do that because they don't have the technology. They can't use a technology. We have to recognize that there's a huge swath of patients out there who really don't have the ability to leverage these technologies. Even something like Medisafe, which is really darn easy to use. Some of our patients don't have a smartphone even, right? So how are they going to do that? So I think that's one set of barriers. The other set of barriers, which we need to recognize, is that not all of our patients are what we call, one of the things I do in my life is I'm a co-founder of the Society for Participatory Medicine. And we have this term e-patients, where the E is engaged, empowered, enlightened. And these kind of things are important for patients to be in order for them to engage even in digital health tools. So you need a patient who's really part of the discussion, who really wants to be a part of the conversation, wants to improve their health, And so if you have a patient who is not an e-patient, not even near being an e-patient, it's hard to get them to want to engage in digital tools, whether they're self-help tools like Medisafe, or whether they're, it's telemedicine or anything else.
That brings up kind of a good conversation to pivot towards about engagement in general. So we're talking about engaging and empowering patients. That's something that pharma is investing heavily in. So I want to ask you, how do you see pharma driving patient engagement? And a follow-up to that would be, and how do you have any concerns about that?
Yeah, I mean, as long as I've been in healthcare and in industry, also talking to pharmaceutical companies, there's no question that pharmaceutical companies want to sort of be somewhere in the midst of that relationship between the doctor and the patient. But the reality is that is it's a hard thing for them to do, because, for one thing, and this is not news to anybody on this webinar, pharmaceutical companies are just not trusted. In fact, last year in a Gallup poll survey, they are among the least trusted of all industries. So, that's below finance and below government and below lots of other things. So it's hard to really get in there, and we have to understand that this relationship between the patient and their healthcare professional, their doctor usually, is really kind of sacrosanct, and it's hard to get in the midst of that. So what I think, we need to think about pharmaceutical companies doing is helping both. How can I help the doctor? How can I help the patient? And how can we, sort of do that in the background with full transparency to help them achieve their goals? So when I'm working with a patient, I don't want them to achieve my goals. I want them to achieve the goals they want to achieve. Why should they take this medication? Well, what are your goals in life? What do you want to do? And how are we going to help you achieve those goals by helping you stay healthy? And here's how you do that. But I think in a similar way, an analogous way, I should say, pharmaceutical companies need to be driving patient engagement in a background way. They need to be supporting it through, perhaps sponsoring tools and sponsoring other things that can help improve that relationship, that communication, and particularly this is important when you're dealing with medications that may be expensive, difficult to take, difficult to understand, and so on. I think the pharmaceutical companies can offer a lot of useful information there. And so I think those are some of the things that we should be thinking about in this space.
Now, Dr. Sands, with all your years in practice, how have you seen the patient role in medication management evolve over time? Do you think that patients are more empowered in medication and in therapy treatment? And if so, is that a good thing?
Yeah, another great question, Matt. I think that we have, so first of all, I think since I started in practice, which is now a long time ago, we have seen patients become more, their eyes are open wider, let's put it that way. They understand more. First of all, they have access to more information than ever before. And the information they have about medications in this example is interesting, because it's not just advertisements, although that's changed a lot too. For example, we have direct-to-consumer advertising now. All of a sudden, patients are coming and asking me about conditions that, arguably don't really need to be treated. And okay, fine, but it's a discussion to have. But direct-to-consumer advertising is one thing, but then patients can actually drill into this. They can read not just the pharmaceutical company's information online, but they can actually do a literature search, right? They can search the world's medical literature and read anything they want. They can also go online and read about others' experiences with those medications. And the interesting thing is that every day in the United States, this is data from the Pew Research, every day in the United States, more patients go online to seek medical information or even get healthcare than see a doctor in the United States. Which is really kind of interesting. And more than half of them are changing their behavior as a result of those interactions online. So if you think about it, this is a brave new world, because it's not even new anymore. Patients are going online. They're learning not just what maybe we officially want them to know, or the pharmaceutical companies may officially want them to know, but they're also reading about we're reading all the research that went into these things, and they're reading about post-surveillance. They're reading about patients' experience, both through studies and through anecdote. And so I think that's really changed a lot. So yeah, patients, I think, have a huge amount of information available to them right now, and that is driving their decisions about whether they're going to start a medication, whether they're going to stop taking a medication, whether they're going to ask for a new medication. So all those things become very, very important. And I think this is a good thing. I think that knowledge is power, as Voltaire said, I think. Was that Voltaire? No, that's Francis Bacon, sorry. Knowledge is power. So knowledge is power. And so this is really an important thing. I want my patients to be educated and enlightened. I want them to be e-patients so that we can have an informed conversation about medications, which medication to choose. My patients need to understand the options. So yeah, this is a good thing, and I'm excited about it, and it's in general terrific. But we can't forget, Matt, that we have patients who don't have access to this information, right? And so we can't forget about those patients, and we can't, just practice veterinary medicine because they can't go online and research this.
So let's talk a little bit more about creating or supporting those e-patients, as you say. That's a great phrase. So what, in your opinion, is the better form of solution? Is it around treatment focused, or is it something that's more holistic? How are we going to create these e-patients?
Yeah, so when you talk about these digital tools, patients don't think of themselves as a set of systems. So they don't think of themselves, okay, I got this cardiology part of me, and I got this pulmonary part of me, and I got this gastrointestinal part of me. They're not that. They don't think I have a a cardiology medication list and a pulmonary medication list and a GI medication list. It's not like that, right? I'm one patient. I got one medication list. I'm me. Okay. So it is ridiculous to think that patients are going to say, okay, I'm going to use this point solution for this particular problem I have, and I'm going to use this point solution for this, and this for that. And that's not realistic because, again, it's one patient. They only have so much attention to divide. So we want to focus, if we're going, we have precious little attention from the patients, and we've got to make the most of that. There needs to be one holistic interaction, whether it's health related, medication related, whatever. It needs to be coming at them through a single channel.
That's a great statement. You think commonly the people who are receiving healthcare are thinking about that they only have such little time with their providers, and it flips that notion on its head to think about providers only having such little attention from patients. It's a really poignant thing to point out about healthcare today.
Yeah, and it's true. It carries over also into physicians. We have the same thing when I've designed tools for physicians. We can't think that we're going to get their attention over here and they're going to log into this and log into that. Just not realistic. And we have the problem today already because, as many of us know, we have access to patient portals as patients. So we have access to patient portals, which sounds great. I helped design one of the nation's first patient portals here in Boston. And it's great because patients now have access to communicate with their healthcare teams, have access to their records and their appointments and blah, blah, blah. It's fantastic. However, if you look at it from the patient's point of view, it's terrible. Why? Because most patients don't get all their healthcare within one healthcare system. So a typical patient may be having to go to 3 or 4 or more different portals to get all of their information, communicate with all their healthcare teams. So this is an important thing we all need to keep in mind.
That we could have a whole nother webinar on that topic. But so we have a few minutes left. We're kind of starting to wind down on time here. I want to make sure that we address some of the questions that we have from our participants. So one question that we received was, how many people are not tech savvy and what happens to their health needs? Which I think you talked a little bit about social determinants a little bit earlier. Should we address that a little bit more about people who are not tech savvy in this COVID during post?
Yeah, I haven't seen a recent survey on that, so I don't want to quote you improperly. I think that we have to think about all of these social determinants, what language people speak, what their tech literacy is, what they have access to because of their, they may not have internet access in their home, for example. I will tell you though, that this, your smartphone has been a great bridger of the digital divide, because all of a sudden people don't need Wi-Fi in their home. They have this accesses all the world's information, right? And it's great. And many of my patients, for example, when we're doing telemedicine visits, they're using their phone because that's all they can use. But that has limitations as well. So we got to think about that as well. And, so certainly with Medisafe, it's built for this kind of thing. But there are other apps that don't really work so well over a phone.
Well, and to add to that, Shannon, too, we heard from Novartis, at HLTH that was really helping to ease the post-discharge experience. And so a lot of times they're working closely with their healthcare provider partners to then determine, okay, they're going to work with a patient and say, do you want printed materials that can help, with that discharge, or, guide them through a more digital experience? And so, there are still options out there for people that maybe don't have that, that connected Wi-Fi home experience, but that, they're certainly recognizing from a larger experience that digital is a major shift, and, creating more options.
Yeah, that's well said. And I have to add to that, as our Medisafe product marketer, that specifically to Medisafe, we do have the statistical breakdown of our users based off of country, age, gender, and there's an even spread of people of different age ranges, which sometimes in some ways does represent a population that is a little less tech savvy. So we do have that supported on our platform. I can't let it go without saying that. And the next question we had was, how do we help patients or caregivers prepare for a remote consultation?
Yeah, that's a whole discussion that we don't have time to answer right now. It's something I helped our large practice do. So as I organized our training materials and our best practices, I think you have to think broadly in terms of, well, first of all, you have to think about how do patients prepare and how do healthcare professionals prepare? And secondly, it's about the technologies. How do you set up the technology? How do you teach people how to interact online? For healthcare professionals, how do you do a visit online? What are the things you should do? How do you prepare for that? How do you do an examination, these sorts of things? How can you make the most of that interaction? And what we need to understand is that as we move from the face-to-face visit, which is the gold standard, over to messaging-based interactions, such as with secure messaging, for example, or even text messaging, to the telephone, to video things. All of these things have different attributes, and we need to understand what are the opportunities, but what are the limitations of each of these channels as well. So there's a whole big discussion to be had there, and we unfortunately don't have time to answer all that, but I'd be happy to have a conversation with you following this.
That sounds great. Yeah. So finally, I think we're wrapping up in time, but I think it's important to have one closing question that I'll pose for you, Dr. Sands, and that's when we're talking about this conversation of what pharma needs to do and the expectations of providers, we don't want to lose sight of the importance of patients. So what do you think that patients need to be fully invested and confident in their care, in their own care, really?
Well, I believe that I want to encourage all patients to step up and take some responsibility for their own care and their own health. I try to encourage all of my patients to have an interest, to be involved. If we treat our patients, and I'm speaking from a healthcare professional standpoint, if we treat our patients like 2-year-olds, no offense to my pediatrician colleagues, but if we treat our adult patients like 2-year-olds, then they're going to assume that role in many cases. They're just going to step back. What we need to do is, we as healthcare professionals need to encourage our patients to step up and to work with us on our decisions, to share in the decision making, to do some homework, do some research. This is your life. This is your health. This is really important. But I also think that societally, we need to be, so first of all, we need to be teaching healthcare professionals about this and how to do this, how to do digital, how to engage patients in their health, how to be e-physicians, for example. But we need to be actually teaching patients before they're patients how to be e-patients. And one of the things I'm very interested in as the Society for Participatory Medicine is, can we really educate maybe we should be educating everybody when they're in health class in junior high school or high school. Can we educate them how to be e-patients, how to prepare for a visit, how to have a conversation with your physician, how to be more assertive? So I think those are things, those are skills that we should be teaching early to our citizens. And I think that would be very helpful. And of course, I encourage everybody to join the Society for Participatory Medicine to learn more. Have to put that plug in.
Yes, yes. Well, all right, so I think that's the end of our official webinar. One question did come through that we can address as kind of a post item. This question was, where do we see technologies like ID caps to monitor ingestion and therefore adherence, and reminders to take oral capsules and caplets that can be shared with prescribers, patients, caregivers, and others in real time?
So first of all, I like the fact that you said shared with patients and caregivers, because I think that's really important. That's a part of this. I think that we have to understand that in general, we have to think about the picture in a big way, which is that we as doctors don't have the bandwidth to monitor our patients' drug adherence. And you know, and I'll be honest with you, we are mailed or faxed, actually, we're faxed reports from pharmacies, usually from health plans, saying, oh, we noticed that based on the fill history, your patient is not taking this medication appropriately. And, you know, physicians just don't have the bandwidth to deal with that. You know, we're lucky if we might remember to deal with that next time the patient comes in. So we have to recognize that. So I think we have to understand what we're going to do with this information once we get it. Feeding back to the patient and caregivers, I think, is a great piece of this. But to your specific question about ID cap, I actually remember when Proteus first introduced their ID cap, and healthcare futurists were just drooling all over this. And they said, oh my God, this is great. It's so cool. And it is cool. I get it. I work in technology. I think it is a really cool solution. However, we have to understand that, you know, cost of medications is already a huge issue. And if we're going to add an incremental cost to each pill, I think that's kind of a non-starter at some level. Sure, if it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, then yes, maybe it would at some point be economical. But I think we have to think, if we're going to add any cost, we need to be thinking about, is it really worthwhile? What is, you know, why is it so critical that the patient take the medication? There may be public health issues for certain medications where it makes sense to do that. There may be patients who are dangerously psychotic, and I know that the early approval for that came for a psychiatric drug, a psychotropic drug. So yeah, there may be certain situations where this is useful, but we have to understand, what are the use cases? Why is this going to be useful? Who's it useful to? And who's going to monitor that information?
I guess you could kind of extrapolate that statement to all of technology. Who is it going to be?
Yes, you could.
Who's going to monitor it? Where are we going to take it? So I think that that's a great way to end our time together today. I want to thank all of our participants for spending their time with us. And I want to thank both you, Matt, and Dr. Sands. Thank you so much for this really valuable and important conversation now and really for the future going forward in healthcare. So we'll sign off. Thank you.